as we know, HCI India is still an evolving domain among industry and academic communities. So by the end of today, we'll know how it's emerging and where it's going. And I'm very proud to kick off the day with a power panel here, sitting here. I'll just make brief introductions because it's much more eloquent to let them speak. So there is Praneeth, Sarita, and Mukta. They're all UX professionals from the industry. And then we have a thought leader, entrepreneur, Tatkat. And we have Jackie there, who I call a true blue HCI researcher. So now I'll turn over to the panel, and we'll see what the panel holds for us. And I think by the end of the panel, we'll have some answers to some questions. Okay? So let's start. Just before each of the panelists answers the first question, they can introduce themselves a little more. You know, maybe talk a little bit, whatever they want to about themselves, right? So the first question I wanted to kind of kickstart is, HCI in India is kind of an enigmatic entity. It's seductive, definitely, and I want it to be seductive. But why is it still an enigma? Well, it's not really struck roots. It's still stuck with design schools and context inquiry and stuff like that, right? So it's not emerged as this full fleshed out kind of domain, right? So I want to ask, why is this, and what is HCI in India, and its current kind of status, and where it's headed. So these are 3 questions. So you can choose to answer any one of them, and let's see. Okay, I'll move it on to Tatkat.
Morning, everyone. Whenever I think of HCI, the first thing that comes to my mind is Alan Cooper's fantastic book, The Inmates Are Running the Asylum. And I think we technologists are always blamed, rightfully so, for making the world complex for the lesser mortals. And I think having come from a computer science background, I'm probably one of the perpetuators of that. And I think 20 years back, 25 years back, when I kind of started working, all of us engineers were pseudo HCI guys. I mean, I remember working at Siemens and Philips and those companies, and we used to build our own interfaces. We were like on the spot, think on the spot kind of ethnographers who would just sit up in the AC rooms and build our own personas and narratives and what have you. And in the last 20 years, I think we have thankfully seen a lot of change towards the fact that we have a lot of professional anthropologists and ethnographers and human computing researchers here, because I think the way the world is changing there, we cannot leave it to computer scientists alone. So that's how I look at the part of it. Just to quickly reflect on that, my journey last 25 years building high-tech products there has clearly seen that I think the opportunities, and just 2 days back we also, for example, things like Amazon Go and how it has the power to change things for it. And I was just actually thinking 12 years back, I wrote a blog post where I actually wrote something like this, where I said, I imagine a future where shoplifting will be the way to do shopping. And I don't take credit for that. I hope the Amazon guys haven't read my blog post, but that's what I wrote 12 years back. And I think I can see a technology really coming to that kind of a rescue where we are creating those experiences, whether it is an Alexa, whether it is an Amazon Go, whether it is a Google Home or something, where the technology is really going to make life simpler for people. So to me, in one sentence, if I have to summarize it, I think human computing to me is all about making computing more like human beings, but not going to, I think there is a very fine line where we don't want to cross it. The line that biologists have actually agreed that, hey, we are not going to clone human beings. And I think at a certain point, HCI has to probably say that, hey, that's where the HCI kind of stops to me, because the lines will be so blurred that probably the Turing test kind of things will actually start happening there. I think for all right reasons, Turing tests should always fail, because the machines should be machines and the humans should be human, and there should be a way to kind of make them coexist. So just a few thoughts on that.
So, Sarita?
Hi, I'm Sarita Sheshgiri. I am not with Samsung anymore, like I was telling Nimi. I recently joined IIIT Bangalore as a visiting faculty. My training was in political science, and when I came to Bangalore after submitting my thesis, I just got into technology user research and technology research from Motorola onwards to Nokia to Samsung, and it's been a long journey. I've been a user researcher. I have been what they would call an ethnographer, but I'd like to call myself a social science researcher. To answer one of Nimi's questions, I would say it's not so much about HCI as much as human technology interaction. because here what we are looking at is for human beings, and what are the mental models that they have in them? How are they interacting with this? It's not just a device anymore, right? It's a whole system. It's a whole paraphernalia of things out there. It's within and it's without. So for me, what interests me would be to really understand more about this human technology interaction, so to speak. And in all this, just to give you an example, if you look at the way demonetization has happened today, and you have all these people, many of them, who have just about started having a smartphone, especially if you look at people from the blue-collar worker category, like the lower, economically underprivileged and yet not below the poverty line, right? And then, of course, you have the mass of rural users. They have just about got a smartphone. They have probably not even got into Google or got themselves a Google account or don't know about email. So don't ask them about Paytm and stuff like that. Some do, some don't. And suddenly there are all these things that they have to transact, which is cashless, which is not tangible, which is, it's like technology for them is scaring them at this moment. I just feel that if we go back, try and understand the human mental models, try to understand how they interact with this. I'll just give you another example. If you're talking about data that is getting digitized, you're also talking about data that is out there, sitting out there, human personal information that is sitting out there in the cloud. I think the other thing that these people who are going to be newly digitized would have to face, and maybe they're already facing, is the issue of privacy, is the issue of trust. Where is my information going? What is this repository? I can't see it. I don't know it. Should I trust it? Right? So that's another thing. Just to answer another of Nimi's questions, why is it that HCI it has not really come up in the way that it should have in India? One thing that from my experience I've seen is having worked in all these companies the past several years, it's like it's always here and now. We don't have time, short turnaround cycles. I know there is a return of investment to looking at users, understanding them, whatever. But you know what? We need to get this desktop wallpaper working, this wallpaper screen. It is regional UI. It is for the people who want to stay connected to their villages back home. You know what? Just quickly do this. So then HCI and maybe every other thing you know which requires careful investigation goes to the wind. And you just have to sit and do some basic user testing. Take it to the users and say, does it make sense to you? Does it make sense to you? Oh, it doesn't? All right, it's so simplistic. I think we just need to break this and go back to the storyboard, much before the storyboard perhaps, and just go back from there and start going forward again. That's the way I see it. So it's human technology intervention is the way I see it.
Praneeth?
Hey, good morning. So a little bit about myself, and I'll try that to the questions that Nimi has asked. So I started as a computer science student, and at some point, I realized that it's not the technology that I'm building that's important to me, but it's how people use the technology that's more interesting. And that's how I've moved on to become an ethnographer and then work mostly in the consumer space. And for the last few years, I'm in the business-to-business space where we build tools for engineers and scientists, and those guys eventually build technology for their end users. And one key thing, especially when you look at human-computer interaction in India and all, so just to give you a story about this transportation company, which is actually trying to build a technology team that wants to do driver distraction, that wants to do driver scheduling. And they want to use AI and all this other new technology that's coming out to make sure the safety of the drivers, they want to make their logistics much more efficient and all. And if I ask you to think of what company this might be, you probably are thinking of Ola, Uber, and all these companies, right? But incidentally, this is a company in northern Karnataka in a small town called Hubali, who are into transportation of trucks and logistics. Right? These are the guys. Now technology has become so pervasive and easy to access that small companies in India are actually using the power of this technology to push it to make sure that their users or the end consumers or customers actually have better, safer lives when they're on the road and with the use of this technology. Now, while technology is actually being pushed to smaller towns, and as Sarita has just mentioned about having demonetization, actually pushing for better payment systems, better identity systems, and all of this, but there is still a lack of HCI practitioners actually getting into this space and having, making an impact to make sure we are providing the right kind of interactions for this new kind of users who are going to use this technology. And right now, the way I've worked a little bit with startups for a few years, and I see that it's good that these guys are more open to try out, design researchers, hiring more design researchers, hiring more user researchers to actually make sure that, products that they're building in the consumer space are easy to use, they actually meet a particular need of the end users. But the small companies or the SME sector still is way lacking behind. You go talk to them about design, they think design comes at the end to actually make things pretty for their users. And I think there's a lot of evangelizing that needs to be done in making sure that the Indian companies understand the power of design or power of HCI in how we can transform and make the Western technology more Indianized and make the consumers' lives easier and safer and everything around it. So with that, maybe.
Mukta?
Yeah, so I'm Mukta and I work at SAP Labs. Have been working there for about a decade now, doing user experience for enterprise business software, quite remote from what Sarita and Praneeth have been doing in the consumer space. So we are looking at end users in the business domain primarily. But coming to my academic background, I was trained as an architect who builds spaces. So in that sense, the human-centeredness of things comes naturally to most architects because they have to build these spaces for humans ultimately. But linking back to the question which Nimi said of the evolution of HCI in India, I think largely I was one of the early, postgraduates from IIT Bombay in visual communication. So interaction design was not really a stream at that point in time, in the early 2000s. There were a few academic courses here and there, more as a specialization than as a full-fledged course. Since it primarily, most of these interaction design things, or HCI, started in technological institutes. So IIT Bombay is primarily a technological institute, and design was just one of those one-off things which had come in there. So the technical influence was really, really strong. And that, to some extent, impacted, in my opinion, the entire evolution of HCI, because it was always grounded in technology. As Tathagat mentioned, technology drove the HCI rather than the other way around, at least initially. Of course, over the course of time, now we are no longer talking just about HCI, but we are talking in terms of HCD, where it's about human-centeredness. We are talking about design thinking, where it is a blend of HCI is more a blend of desirability, viability, and feasibility. That is, you consider the technological aspects, you consider whether it makes business sense to do it, and then you also consider, what you primarily consider is what the user needs, which is the desirability aspect. Of course, desirability as a concept is something which keeps changing. Currently, it's the Facebook world where the connectedness, social connectedness is the most desirable thing. You have friends who are on Facebook, so you want to be on Facebook. Is that really a need for the user? Currently, it is. A few years from now, we don't know whether this social connectedness is as important. Sarita mentioned about the security aspect of it. The data, whatever you're putting in there into the Facebooks and the Googles of the world, there's so much of trust in those systems. We don't know how much of data is being collected there. How will that data be utilized by whosoever, in whatever form? So the security aspect of it is not really as prominent for us as the need to be socially connected in the current context. And this may keep changing over the years. So what user wants, the human-centeredness is something which would keep evolving and changing as the world moves on. Technology will be the underlying thing, but I think our focus should be more on the human values aspect of it than on the technology aspect of it or just a human-centered interaction. It should be what is the value that we are adding to the human life. Are we actually making it simple? Yes, social connectedness, in a way, maybe we are making it simple. But if you look at it from another extreme, aren't we adding to the information chaos? Aren't we always connected and losing out on the human connectedness? So these are questions which we will have to ponder going ahead. Okay? So now maybe I'll pass on to Jackie.
Hi, so I'm Jackie O'Neill. I work at Microsoft Research in India, so I'm based here. I'm an ethnographer, but I got into ethnography many years ago because I wanted to design computer systems. So I would say that I am a true multidisciplinary person. My degree was in social science, my master's was in computer science, and my PhD was in HCI, so the merging of the two. I've always worked in the technology industry. Previously, before I came to India, I worked at Xerox, and it's a little bit of an uncomfortable place to be because you're a social scientist, soft skills, HCI type person in a tech industry full of systems people, theoretical computer scientists, people who are doing hard security things, and you constantly have to justify yourself because ethnography is all about qualitative methods. So you're working with people who understand numbers. And they don't just understand numbers, they think numbers are the only truth in the world. So you constantly, over the years, even staying in the same company, you still, new people come in, people leave, you constantly have to explain and demonstrate, and that's probably the most important thing, the value of your research. Because if you just talk to people about it, they can't believe. What, do you go and watch some people while they work? How can that possibly be generalizable? And things like that. So it's a little bit of an uncomfortable place. And then to answer your question, I can't give you an India-specific answer because I've only been here 3 years. I don't know enough about the history of the country and its academic institutions. However, I can give you some ideas. So ethnography is something you learn by apprenticeship. You can be taught some things, but I and every other ethnographer I know learnt it by working with some other ethnographer, okay? If you don't have any ethnographers, how can you learn by apprenticeship? Otherwise, you self-teach. And self-teaching is fine, but only really, really, really good people are able to self-teach. So doing the observation isn't particularly hard. Anyone with a good eye, I would say, can do observation. The difficulty is doing the analysis. And it takes a very particular eye and way of thinking about things to analyze things in a way that enables you to design computer systems. So many social scientists are looking at social structures. So they're looking maybe at the role of gender in the workplace or the role of power in the workplace. And while these are important, they only have a limited role in helping you design a computer system. To design a computer system, you really need to know all the tiny things people are doing. How do I look at you? Do I look at you when I hand you that file? That actually matters, because if you're going to make that electronic, that look is an acknowledgement. She has acknowledged that she received the file from me. So now if you send it to her electronically and there's no acknowledgement, then you've lost something from the system. You only learn that by looking at the tiny, tiny details that go on. So it's quite a hard thing to get into. And I think there's a couple of things which mean that it hasn't really taken off. One is the teachers, and two is this sort of soft qualitative methods in an otherwise hard discipline. So when I first came to India in 2009, I did a tour of the IITs, and I went to their social science departments, and I was giving my talk on how I'd done a study at call center and the technologies that we designed on the basis of that. And they were just like, oh, why would you do that? So these were social scientists in IITs, but they didn't want to design technology. The idea you might use social science for designing technology was alien because they wanted to build theory. So I think if you look in the UK and the US, how ethnography got into computer science. It was very pragmatic. There are a whole set of ethnomethodologists, a particular type of sociology which doesn't build theory, but looks at the detail of action and interaction. And they weren't really getting much funding because they were not part of mainstream sociology. But computer science departments were getting lots of funding. And they thought, if we want to get some funding, why don't we work with those computer scientists to design computer systems? So it happened in that way, and that was like maybe 20 or 30 years ago, and now you've got a discipline. But the same confluence of events isn't just going to happen here. So I think we need to find another way of building it. And one of the problems, as I say, before I hand back, is because of the apprenticeship model. So who's going to teach it? So I take on interns, and I really love taking on interns and getting them infused, but I have such limited bandwidth. And Nimi takes on interns, and she gets them infused, and everyone can train, but it's one or two people. So how we turn that into a bigger movement, I don't know.
Yeah. I'm a kindred spirit, Jackie.
Yes.
Okay, back to my second very rehearsed question. You guys are all very formidable. I had to rehearse. So in my opinion, the current obsession in HCI is about making technology very human, right? Humanoid robots. So if I remember in one of Lucy Suchman's keynotes on healthcare and healthcare being taken over by humanoid robots, she called it utopian and a myth, right? So I want this provocative challenge that Suchman raised and ask you all, is that the current obsession? Do technology, are techies wanting to make technology human? Is that the trend? And if so, what can be the motivation, right? Of course, we all know that it's a better technology, it responds to humans, so on and so forth, but what really is this driving force that's producing these humanoid-like experiments? And is that the current obsession? That's the first question. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really a tough question. So I'll try to take my own stance on that. I think there might be obviously a reason of, one is the novelty towards new technology that people are looking at, hey, how can I really, because to me, I think at a fundamental nature, a human being is all about testing the boundaries. Okay, now we have gone to this far, can we do something about it? Now my machine learning has come to this far, can I go to the next level? So it's fundamentally looking for how can we try to, so I think there is one school of thought among us which is like, I don't care about the problem, but let me go and find a solution nevertheless. And then I'm like, okay, I have a solution in search of a problem. So I know that, hey, this thing can solve some stuff, but then now let me go and find a problem around it where I can go and kind of plug and play that. Second could be a genuine need where, because if we go by the economics of last 2,000 years, the Malthusian period of economics where the real economy really took off like a hockey stick happened around the Industrial Revolution. And I think we will probably see the next leverage point only when we are able to de-link probably the mechanical advantage that we have between labor versus productivity, which happened 200 years back, hasn't happened in the last 200 years. And I think there has to be probably a next wave which is going to make it happen. So there might be some unknown desire. I don't think 200 years back people thought that the Industrial Revolution will lead the world to this direction. They just were probably solving some local tinkering problems, and it just went out of control and happened like that. So I think there is every opportunity that this might actually create something dramatically new than what we are doing. And third could be, I think, the search for very, very specific problems. I mean, we are talking about solving, putting implants in the brain, or we are talking about robotic medicines, or we are talking about things which cannot be solved by the state of medicine that is known to mankind today. So there might be, in that process of looking for very specific problems, people might be stumbling upon certain technological advances that will actually have much wider implications to things. So I definitely see these three driving forces. Probably they are all in three different parallel tracks. I don't think there's anyone sitting making a plan for all the three to be synced up, but I think they will all meet somewhere, or they may not even meet for all we know. But I think these are, to me, big forces that I see definitely driving some of the things that's happening there. Maybe we'll hear from others.
Yeah, we'll hear from others. And
All right. That's a tough question, first of all. So again, from what I know, and in the context of you know AI being so pervasive these days, right? What people want to do with artificial intelligence is not really artificial, and they want to get as close to the human intelligence. And in that context, if you go back to the history of AI, and the very first paper that was written as a grant, seeking a grant back in the late 60s, I think, it was called the McCarthy paper, and now they've created a website itself, like you look for McCarthy paper, the paper itself comes up. And the way McCarthy actually called out artificial intelligence was as a human assistive technology. Right? He wanted computers to assist in humans, and that's the reason why there was need for artificial intelligence. And I think over the last 35, 40 years, we've gone away from seeing computers as assisting humans to actually computers and robots actually taking over a lot of the work that we do. And that has also got to do in terms of how industrial age has come together, right? In terms of all the hard labor robots should do or the machines should do. And I think there's some kind of a disconnect between where you want machines or robots to come and assist humans in terms of what they're trying to do versus robots trying to become as close to humanoids or start behaving like humans, and which starts raising a whole lot of other problems like, what is this interaction going to be? Are you, does a robot which behaves like a human, does it understand the nitty-gritties of how we behave when we are in a social context, how we you go to a place like India and we have all these things like, caste systems and how we interact with different people, and, can you leave a humanoid robot out there on the road, and would it actually figure out how to interact with various kinds of people that it's coming across? Can you actually build that intelligence into it? I don't think so, but I think we have... Right. So, yeah, so how do you... I think there was that derailing happening between going from human assistive technology to technology that replaces human, and people trying to build, like as Tathagata said, you've got a solution, now let's go find a problem to it, and now that we can build robots or things that can behave like humans, let's see how we can use them. And I think there's that tension always happening between these two things, and yeah.
I think it is an obsession right now. I totally agree with Praneeth that it's a misconception of original ideas, which is to assist people. But I also think it's a fallacy, and it's not the right way to look at things, because people are fantastic at being creative, making sense of things, understanding things, being social. These are things we're really, really, really good at. Computers are really, really, really bad at them. Computers are really good at adding things up incredibly fast, okay? That's what they're great at. You can use that for all sorts of amazing things. So the best way to look at it is to think about how can we use these computers that can do really rapid search, really rapid analysis of data, and put them together with these people who can really well make sense of things and understand the things and come up with new, creative, exciting ideas. And if you do that, then you've got a world where things will be much better. But for some reason, and I don't know why, because I've worked with technologists for the whole of my career, so you would think I would have some understanding, but there is a tendency, particularly with, say, machine learning people, or big data people, to really believe that what they're doing represents how people think, and therefore they can make computers that think like people. And I have had so many big arguments with people that are on a philosophical basis. It's a bit like believing in God or not believing in God. They believe in AI as they imagine it, which is replacing people. I don't. I have learned that you cannot win, because there is no way, neither of us, it's a philosophical difference in understanding. So I tend to leave those arguments a little bit now. I try and temper some of the more extreme versions of it, but more often try and suggest that if we design really amazing computer systems that can do the things they do well and support people in what they do well, that's where we're going to have a real advantage in the future. And that's what's going to look like artificial intelligence, but really is going to be intelligence from people supported by data processing from computers. Very clever data processing from computers.
Sorry, is it on?
Yeah.
So I remember we had this discussion when I was in Samsung, and there was this thing, it was something to do with actually healthcare, interestingly. And then we had this thing about, oh, we don't want to go down the uncanny valley kind of feedback, right? Where you have machines suddenly becoming human, and then you don't know what's happening, they're taking over. So right, we of course, we're all high-strung people, so we reach there, right, the end of whatever, doomsday perhaps. Having said that, I do believe, like Jackie and Tathagat rightly pointed out, there are certain aspects which you can expect a robot, or at least a human-like face to it, to take care of it. So there have been a lot of things like people suffering from autism, people suffering from Parkinson's, and even where you have people recuperating from a major accident, injury, where you have part of it is kind of taken over by a robot, part of it is has to still be taken up by a human assistant. So you have both of these happening. But I do believe when it comes to acquiring some sort of data with regard to just logistically stacking the data with regard to health, having taken care of privacy issues and security issues, after all that is addressed, yes, we can stack it up, you can automate that. But then there is this basic thing where you need someone at the other end to tell you that, yes, I understand what you're saying and this is what I'll do for you, or no, I don't get it, can you repeat it again? And I feel, at least in the Indian context, from the couple of user studies I'm doing and still doing, people just do not relate all that well. If it is something which is like a chronic health problem, that's okay. If it's something acute, then the responses are quite different. So I think we need to understand where it can fit in and where it cannot. I'm not saying it will not fit in anywhere, but then there are contexts where it will and contexts where it will not. And it's not so much about just about people belonging to a certain strata of society where you may say that, yes, machines will not probably understand the nuances of human relationship, nuances of human behavior. I'm smiling, but I might be really angry with you, right? So there are things like that you don't expect a machine to get quite right. However, with machine learning, we're hoping that may happen. But then we do understand that we still are a very social people. We do want to deal with a human being at the other end more often than not, many times than not.
Okay, so I will speak more from an enterprise business software, so I may not be in consonance with whatever all of these other panel members say. So for us, at least in the business software world, machine learning and artificial intelligence is somehow, it could be the edge over other competitors. It could also be the edge over forging ahead in the technology business space. And why? Primarily because in the technological world or in the business software world, you have all these areas. I mean, take, for example, oil and gas. Typically, in the past at least, you had all these oil and gas operators going out there, getting the measurements or whatever it is from the field, getting the necessary details from the field. Was it good for them? Was it a good experience? Was safety considered there? It was perhaps, but not completely. And this is where this intervention of machine learning helps hugely the end users or the operators themselves. Because here we are talking about data which is being picked up from these machines by embedded things, by IoT, which is pushing all this data where, yes, the humans finally have to take the call. But the humans do not have to go out and do all the hard work in collecting this data. So that's where I beg to differ from the other panel members, that machine learning is And artificial intelligence is important in the context of business software, where the software does all the hard work for you of the information processing. As Jackie rightly pointed out, artificial intelligence in the context of information processing is what is key here, and not really the decision making, which I agree with all the other people here, that we should still leave that to the humans. You cannot, displace a human and say, okay, the machine will take all the decisions. The machine will process all this information and give you in a format, in a consumable format, where you are allowed to take the decisions. So that's what machine learning and artificial intelligence intervention would be in the context of business software.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Just one final thing as well. I don't really know when machine learning became artificial intelligence. So I'm very old. I've been around quite a long time. And so I saw the first round of artificial intelligence and its failure, and the fact that you couldn't talk about artificial intelligence for many, many years. And then I've also seen the new rise of the new discussions about artificial intelligence. So the first round was very rule-based. It was rule-based reasoning, and it was going to change the world, and then it all went meh, okay? Because it didn't work, because people realized they couldn't write all the rules. And then everything was quiet, and the machine learning people were happily working on doing statistical analysis. And it was called machine learning. And then suddenly, a couple of years ago, I'm not quite sure when, it moved from machine learning to AI. And even some of my machine learning colleagues are slightly bemused that machine learning has suddenly become AI. So it's like, it maybe was 10 years where AI was like not something you could say you were working on. It was like, oh my goodness, no, we're not doing AI. It was such a failure. And then it's like that was long enough for lots of young people to come up and people to forget about all the stuff that had happened and the big failure. And now suddenly machine learning has been called AI. And I think we should make a distinction between machine learning and AI, because there are some parts of machine learning that really is about trying to do AI, and there's other parts that really are just about machine learning. And nobody would say that machine learning was a bad thing, and no one would say that data processing and exactly the uses you're talking about are fantastic, and they're great steps forward. But there's a whole nother agenda behind the more extreme AI agenda, I would say. But then sometimes it's just used for the original use of assisting people. So I think there's so many different uses of these terms that when we're talking about it, we have to be a little bit careful that we're thinking about the right thing.
Great to see so many numbers. It's very, very heartening. So one last question. I'm dying to ask this question, and we'll turn it over to the audience. Okay. We all know that an HCI practitioner has to wade through several languages. They not only arise from the domain, they also arise from a certain kind of communication each of these domains practice. Now, we all work in these hybrid environments, and we know the origin of the differences within HCI, but when you overlay the socio-cultural influence on it, it hierarchizes these domains within HCI, right? And that causes its own, maybe, hierarchy within the domain, right? Who speaks to who, in what language, which language has the power, so on and so forth. So as practitioners in this very enigmatically seductive HCI domain, as I called it in the beginning, how do you deal with everyday communication? How do you wade through these hierarchies, which are more social than probably technical? So how do you do this? This is more a personal question that comes from your own personal UX. Yeah.
So, I'll pick it up again. I'm sorry, but enterprise UX is what I have been doing, so I'll pick it up from that context, where I'll link it back to, say, the architecture of buildings, for example, because in architecture also you're doing that. You're constantly communicating and talking to different people. It could be a construction worker, a mason who is actually building the wall. You would have to be communicating to them. And you would also be communicating to, say, the structural engineer, but it would be on a different level altogether, because there you're not talking about what is to be built, but I mean in terms of laying a brick, but more in terms of the overall, the bigger picture is what has to be communicated. So you had differing layers of communication depending on the person you're talking to. So you provide with them the information which is needed by them to just execute certain things in some context. So with a mason, it is just about the execution. You only give him that much information which will enable him to do the work that particular day. But with a structural engineer, for example, it would be different. With an interior decorator, it would be different. So you give them the information which is needed to get them all in the same space so that your work goes ahead. I more or less follow, as a practitioner, a similar approach when we are doing enterprise UX. So here we are talking to business people, we are talking to the customers, we are talking to customer representatives, sometimes we are talking to the end users, sometimes we are not talking to the end users, we are talking to representatives of the end users.
Yeah, Mukta, but how do you manage this, this communication itself? Are you understood? Because the languages come from different philosophies, right? So how are you going to manage these boundaries in the beginning, and then how do you surmount it to be understood?
Okay. So right now the approach, at least which we are following in SAP and which is followed in a few other companies, is what we call as design thinking. And what we do in design thinking is we bring up across all of these different stakeholders from different areas into one single room, put them all together in one single space, and allow them to brainstorm, do whatever is necessary. At the end of 3 days, you're all on nearly the same page. So this is one way in which we are mitigating this issue of miscommunication or not being able to all of us come on the same page. So this is one approach that we are following at SAP, and it's proving to be quite useful to us, at least now. Maybe this will also evolve going ahead.
Can I add to
Yeah,
it?
sure.
I think to me it is more interesting to really remove the fluff and really go to the core of why people do things the way, especially when they have no access to technology or tools or resources available. Because that is, I think, in my view, the innate nature of human conversations and bondings, which I think if we are able to go back to, and I think I would agree with Mukta to that extent, the whole design thinking is really all about not really looking at a very superfluous nature, but really going to the core of it and being able to say why people do the way they do things at a fundamental level. And I think some of the most successful companies of our times have been able to figure out so well and package it. We might call it as a minimalistic design or something, but I think that to me, that is the language of design that they are using to communicate. Now, it might be in a verbal form, it might be in a visual form, it might be in a tactile form, it might be in an oral form, but clearly that language they have deciphered of what really makes a society bond, and really what are the key essences of that. So I would really want to kind of look at some of them.
Yeah. Jackie? Okay, Sarita. Sure.
I'm just going to quote an example from the latest project I'm working on. Hope it answers your question. We are working on digital identity, and like I was telling Praneeth, and he was like, it's all over the place. I said, it's just a pilot study right now. Just want to understand what digital identity means to the economically underprivileged in the urban areas, as well as everyone in the rural area. I mean, everyone in the ecosystem in villages. So this is how we are trying to map it for the pilot study. Let's see how the main study takes off. So to start with, how do we make the word digital identity understood by our users? Because we go to the field, we go to the village, and then you say digital identity. Now, when we were speaking to our stakeholders, they pretty much understood what's digital identity, right? We want to see where the government is taking the information, what sort of information, where's that getting stored, how is it going to be reused, and blah, blah, blah. Everyone knows what's digital identity. And of course, we also want to know what's happening on the phone. We want to see what's happening in Facebook, what's happening in WhatsApp. So everyone is like clued in completely, and that's great. And then you go to the field, and then you say, I want to know more about your digital identity. And then they're like, my what? My identity? Well, I have my ID card, I can show you that. And then you say, okay, what about your digital identity? And then it's like, but I don't use any devices. So then it's not just the devices that's taking care of your digital identity. The whole thing is for them, maybe we need to make that, we need to bridge the gap where they have to see it as not just an identity artifact, ID card out there, but how it's getting into the server. The government is taking it, the government is probably going to use it, they get services. So we had this huge challenge in terms of having them understand what we mean by identity. So we said pehchan, in Kannada we said gurtu. So we had all this, but it's still, there's still a gap. And then we are like, okay, so why don't you just tell me who you are, and let's take it up from there. Who are you? So if you are Lalita, okay, who is Lalita? What does she do? Tell us about you, right? And then the other thing is where the stakeholders understand identity as something that's like a transaction. I need the ID card, I need the ration card, I need the voter's card, I need the Aadhaar, because it's getting me these services. So they know identity as just a set of things that help you get a transaction made or happen. But then that's not all identity is about, because if you look at the iceberg, it's like 2/3 and 1/3. So it's like all about emotions and moods and all those things. So that's where the challenge comes, where you need to get back to the stakeholders, make them understand, appreciate, of course they understand, but make them appreciate that it's all these things that we need to dig out and understand as well, and it's not just the tangible transaction part of it.
Yeah, and I'm going to talk about the language gap between technologists and ethnographers.
That cuts to the chase.
Yes. So it's okay. It's hard, and it's hard for people on both sides. Okay, we talk completely different languages. We use the same words to mean completely different things. The practical tips I can give you, or I can say from my experience, is that demonstration and doing are the easiest ways. So people have to be willing to have a little bit of faith that what you do has any value, because if they don't, that's really hard. You're a bit stuck. But even when people have a little bit of faith, the easiest way is to work with them and to say, because they might be like, yeah, I see your ethnography, that's good for knowing about low-income communities. I've been working with auto rickshaw drivers, but what's it got to do with me? I'm a systems person, And so, but actually, there are many systems problems that systems people are working on that ethnographers could probably help with. And so the best way to do it is to find one that you can work with them on and work with them on it. And then you can demonstrate the value. And once people start seeing the value and start seeing that, because HCI is not just about interfaces. And I think that when you're in a tech industry, a tech research industry, people think it's just about the look and feel. Whereas actually it's about the fundamental interaction that goes on. So you're designing the fundamental interaction between the people who are going to use it and the technology. And that actually can affect what maths and what algorithms you need to design. So if you come in at the end to do a nice interface, the chances are you might do a nice interface, but it's not going to help because you need to do that fundamental interaction. So you have to teach people that, because people have this understanding that it's just how things look and feel. Things that we do, so one thing that's good is working with the same team for a period of time, because the more you work together, the more you understand their language and the more they understand your language. And so I've been in places where we've had multidisciplinary teams, where we've had technologists, developers, designers, and ethnographers all working together. And that works really well. The first year was really, really hard. But after that, you're flying. You can actually, because one of the biggest problems is that ethnography is all about revealing the nuances and the shades of grey and all the detail. If you're trying to design a computer system, you want abstractions and you want simple things, and you don't want people pointing out that, oh, yes, that's okay, but you haven't taken into account this and this and this. And I'm not sure your computer system's going to work. It never goes down very well. So it's much better if you can get in right at the beginning and all work together. And so typically what we would do is we'd do a study, and we would even take out computer scientists into the field. One of my most successful pieces of work was we took a color scientist. So these are very, very high, very, very technical people designing color management systems between screens and printers and displays and things like that, out into the field to show how graphic designers and printers manage color. And it completely changed. The guy was like, oh my goodness, all my last 10 years' work has been useless because I've just been designing better color management algorithms, but nobody can use them because they don't understand them. And so some of those things really, really, really help. And you also have to get embedded because it's two ways. You have to get embedded with the technologist because you could say, oh, I want the computer system to do this, but that might be completely impossible. So it's really a two-way process. And the only thing you can do is spend time, I think.
Awesome.
Again, continuing on to what Jackie just said, it is definitely very, very hard as a designer or a HCI practitioner when you're working with technologists because they think you bring the soft skills to the table, and that's not necessarily true always, right? Just a plug, let me start with a little context about the place where we work and to add what we do in terms of cutting across this language barriers between designers and technologists. So we, as a company, make programming languages. Our end users are engineers and scientists. Our internal customers are developers who are computer science with PhDs and they know control systems and all these advanced technical degrees, and they're making products for people like themselves. So what is the role that I play in this organization? Because when I go talk to them, they're like, oh, I know exactly what my customer wants, what my end user wants, because he is like me, right? And so that's the context in which we work, and it's really hard. And a lot of designers who join our company, it takes, like as Jackie said, it takes at least an year for them to understand the team that they're working with, understand what they're doing, before they can actually create that value that they are providing to the teams. And one of the, so we as a UX team at MathWorks have this 7 habits of highly effective UX people. Like it's a play with the book. And the first habit is know your customers. And the way we define customers are our end users and also internal users. So the kind of empathy skills that you bring to the table to understand your end users, you could use all these skills to understand your internal customers, to understand what are their pain points. Why would they not do something that you're asking them to do? Maybe there's a technical, feasibility problem that you don't understand. But once you uncover that, it's easier to converse with this developer to actually get things done the way you think is the right thing for your end users, right? So we have all the skills to actually uncover the latent needs, the pain points, the requirements. You apply these skills internally within your teams, the teams that you're working with, to understand what motivates them, what demotivates them, or what are the barriers that they're facing with. And there are times, when I go into office and I see one of the engineering managers really troubled and, disturbed, I go talk to him, and end of 1 hour of conversation, I feel like I was his counselor, like hearing out all his problems with his internal teams and all. But that builds relationships, end of it. And I understand what is troubling him, so that maybe I can help him out with a new strategy or a method that can bring these 2 separate teams that are having tension to actually do a design thinking workshop with them, so that the other team understands why this team is trying to do something differently. So these are the ways that we could actually cut across all of these tensions between, language barriers, the context barriers, and everything, that you could, have a more collaborative work environment with the people that you work with.
So finally, the audience, you have your rights. Yes. Yeah.
So, my name is Juhi Bhatnagar, and I'm a final year student of BTech here in Delhi. So my question to you is, how do you think we can train students in either computer science or other degrees to be more interested in HCI, so that they can follow their passion? Because the university where I am at, we don't have any professor who teaches HCI. Whatever I know, I have learned it myself. So how do you think we can tackle this problem?
Yeah, I think it's really hard. I strongly agree, I think, with what you're implying, which actually there's probably a lot of computer science students who would really like to do this if only they had access. So I don't know how we push the heads of department. So I actually, in 2009, I wanted to actually teach a course, HCI course on a master's, a computer science master's at IIT Madras. And I got permission from Xerox, who I was working with then, to do the teaching. And I got permission from the computer science head of department because I'd been working with him a little bit. And then he moved to start up a new IIT in the far north of India. And the new head of department had no interest in HCI whatsoever. And that was that. And so it was gone. So I don't know whether there's a way that students can put pressure on their teacher. I'm not sure how we get the message across, but I think that there is a thirst. Certainly many of the people who intern with me then go off to do HCI masters, typically outside of India, which is a real shame because there should be places, things that you can do here. And there are some great HCI masters or HCI courses that are coming up, but less with the soft skills, less with the ethnography, less with the qualitative research. I don't really know how to cross that barrier, but I think if we can, it will be fantastic.
Just to add to what Jackie said, I think that would be the educational route, and obviously there are limited opportunities. If you're really passionate about it, you'll have to go and find some guru. But I can talk about it as a practitioner. For example, I am a mentor at IIT Kharagpur's eCell, and every year I mentor a lot of startups. I think the best thing you can do to yourself is commit to starting a startup in the first year of your college. And then I think that's the best thing you can do to yourself, and live that pain every single day. If you live that pain every single waking hour of your life for the next 4 years, you may or may not come up with a great startup, but I think you will actually have learned a lot of principles of what really makes something interesting to people. One of the things when I went to startups, I say is unless you've spoken to 100 people, looked into their eyes, I don't like a survey monkey approach. Talk to the people on the street and just listen to them. Don't even tell what you stand for. Don't even tell your product. Just listen to them. Don't be a salesman, be an anthropologist. Just learn from there. I think you will discover and stumble upon a lot of things, and then you are ready probably to go to a guru. A lot of times we feel that we should go to the guru, but we are not ready for it. Unless we have really pounded the pavement and really kind of done that stuff there, we are not ready. So I would say the students are best placed today in our country. Just go out and do a startup there and then see how it goes there. Don't worry about the end results of that. You will be on the right track irrespective of whatever you do.